Welcome. I'm really excited to chat with you guys today about something I have been working so hard on and I've created really. So I'm super pumped about it. And I think it's going to be really key to helping you guys understand what your child needs to specifically be working on to get your meal times to be happy and joyful and your kids actually excited and wanting to try new foods, right? So, yeah, so that's what we're going to talk about today. We are talking about the four pillars of feeding success. Because in all of, in my work, what I've learned from working with hundreds and hundreds of families is that there are like these four main areas that are determining the mealtime experience that you are seeing, right? So, how much variety they're eating, how stressed they are, and you are. How afraid or hesitant are they to try a new food? How much distraction they need to get through a meal. That is sort of all determined by these four pillars of feeding success, right? So I'm going to jump right in. Um, you know, that is the basis of my parent course, Unlocking Meal Times, right? So I've revamped our course and I've made it very specific and functional to your child. So it's a little bit more honed in on meeting you where you're at. But each of the levels that your child could be at all have these four pillar components because at each level, these four pillars are going to need to be addressed, but in different ways. Like, we don't want you working on something like eliminating distractions when your child only has two foods. That is just not a good strategy. They're going to melt down and just hate mealtime even more, right? So, at different stages of your child's feeding journey, you're going to be working on each of these four pillars, but in slightly different ways, right? So, that's how I tailored this program. I like kind of reworked it, recreated it to be very specific to where your child's at. So, let's look at the first pillar, which is gut health. Okay, so we need your child's insides to, be jiving along with foods just fine. And what do I mean by that? They need to be digesting the food well, absorbing those nutrients really well. They should not be bloated, have diarrhea or constipation. We need their gut to be functioning optimally. We need their bodies to be, having a good relationship with food. So, teasing out some of those issues and getting to the root cause of, well, what is going on, or is there or isn't there a gut component to why they're a picky eater? Because there may not be. A gut is not an issue in every case, although I will say that picky eaters, their diet tends to have a negative impact on their gut health, because if you're only eating the same 5 or 10 foods, you're going to end up with poor gut health. So usually, like I said, so each of these four pillars is going to play a role in some way. It might not be the cause or the main thing that you're going to focus on, but it's still probably going to be an area that needs to be addressed in some way. Right. So we do that in a bunch of different ways, right? Talking about making foods more nutrient dense, getting rid of things that might be not good for their bodies or their diets. Like, if there's, for example, maybe they are a little bit sensitive to a type of food, or maybe they have reflux, eliminating and getting to the bottom of which of those foods it is and why. That's an important piece of that puzzle. Or are they so backed up? Are they so constipated that they're literally not hungry because they're so full? They literally can't process anything else. We need to get their bowels moving um, and passing, and they should be pooping every single day. So if they're not, we're going to look at that, and that has to be addressed alongside some of these other areas if we want to see success, right? All right, moving on. Pillar number 2 is the sensory system. So you might be familiar with this, or maybe just you're familiar with the 5 senses, but there's actually 8 sensory systems to work on. I know you might not have heard of them, but there's 3 extra ones that you might not have even thought of. And you might not even have thought of things like hearing playing a role in feeding, but it definitely can, right? Certain foods sound differently when they're being chewed in your mouth, right? Or just like the environment, how noisy or quiet it is might play a role in how successful meal times are, right? So feeding, every aspect of our lives is a sensory experience, and food is certainly no different. In fact, food has much more like layered and nuanced sensory components than a lot of the other things that we do, right? Because the food's going into our bodies and then it interacts with our bodies, and it either makes us feel good, it makes us feel bad, right? There's a lot that goes into sensory. Right. So, a lot of common things are kids that are sensitive to touching certain textures or eating certain textures, or even things like smells. Like some kids don't even like to be in the kitchen when parents are cooking or at the table with other foods because the smell can be too overwhelming. Right. So these are things we look at. We help you build a whole profile of your child specifically along those 8 different sensory systems so that we get a really good idea of what's going to work for your child and what's not, what's going to help move them from where they are to a foodie, and what's going to set them back because it's not working with their sensory system. Like a lot of times you're actually kind of butting heads with their sensory system instead of working harmoniously together to have a good experience. So that's what we do. We figure out what's working for your child, what's not, what's going to help give them the best possible experience with food. And let's start there, right? And let's take out the things that are going to make meal times more stressful for them and their body, right? So these are important things that we meet at all different levels of our program, right? So it's going to look very different for a kid that only has 5 foods to a kid that has 20 foods, right? Where we're at with their sensory system and what we're targeting specifically, right? And their sensory system may adjust and change as they go through our program because they are learning to work with their sensory system and problem solve through some of those sensory challenges. Okay, so then number 3, our third pillar, is oral motor skills. And last week I had a whole episode specifically about the 5 oral motor red flags. So if you missed it, go back and watch last week's episode. But the importance of oral motor skills for eating it's just so important because you can't eat if your mouth and your teeth and your tongue are just not working properly. So we need to assess and make sure that everything is working at least at a functional level. We've had kids, in fact, a very recent child came in who literally chewed no foods, swallowing everything. And I actually couldn't believe my eyes, but literally swallowed all foods. Everything had to be cut up super, super fine. And pretty, even though he wouldn't be, his mom didn't consider him a picky eater because he did eat some vegetables and things, but the amount of foods was still kind of limited because he couldn't really chew the foods. So there was a lot of things that were off of the menu for him because of his limited oral motor skills, right? So this is an area that we not just look at and assess to see what's working and what's not working, but making a plan and showing you how to address each of those skills. because the job of the lips is going to be different from the job of the tongue, and the job of the tongue is going to be different from that of the jaw. So we need to know, well, which areas are functioning, which ones are not as optimal, and where do we start with it, right? So that knowledge is super important to have. And again, at all different levels, it's going to be and look a little bit different, right? We're not going to be working on higher level oral motor skills for a child who only has, 6 foods. It's just not going to happen. So we need to work at a very more general level and giving you just some immediate strategies of like, okay, well, what are we going to do? Okay, they're let's just say they're not chewing at all. Okay, well, we need to first of all get in important nutrients. So how are we going to do that? Maybe we're going to start by cutting foods up really small if that's what they can handle. We have to meet them where they're at. We can't just start at the top, because that's going to make progress go slower. They're not going to have a good, enjoyable experience if, like if I brought you as a novice skier who's never skied before to a double black diamond, pretty much like straight up mountain, you're going to be terrified, and it's just going to be too overwhelming, and you're not going to have a good experience, and you're never going to want to ski again. Right? So we can't bring them to the top. We got to start where they're at. And that really goes for everything, but definitely with oral motor as well. You're just going to turn kids off if it's way too beyond what they can do. All right. And our last one is coming right up. So if so far you have been listening and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I hear what she's saying, but I haven't really thought about that, or I haven't really addressed that, or I'm not totally sure. We've addressed it, but like I don't have a full picture of it. Or do I have a full picture? If you have any of those, if any of those thoughts sort of come to your mind, be sure to take our quiz. It is literally 2 minutes. Less than 2 minutes. It's a minute and a half, and it will get you started. You will be able to determine which level in our program your child is at. And then there is a video where you can learn all about why your child is picky and how we can help them get from their fearful space, their stuck space, to actually becoming a foodie, right? That is our goal of every child in our program, is that they actually learn to love food and have a good relationship with food. So if this is you, go to pickyeaterstest.com right now to take our quiz and just get that ball rolling, get that started. Okay, last one, mindset and environment. So mindset is usually a very big missing piece when it comes to feeding therapy. And it's because a lot of times when you bring your child to a feeding therapist, you send them to the room and they go in there and they do something and then they come back out. And there's a disconnect between what the parents should or shouldn't be doing at home. So if you are not learning what to do, what sort of homework and accountability to move through your week, right? Eating with a feeding therapist once a week is not going to change anything at home if you are also not doing anything at home. Like you can't just bring a child and have them go once and then the rest of the meal, all the other meals in the week are just the same as they've always been, right? There are going to be things that you have to change. The way you talk to your kids about food needs to probably change. Maybe cues in their environment. Um, just all different strategies. But if you're not learning and implementing them every day, I'm not even saying it has to be every meal. Like you don't have to stress yourself out about like, not having too much time to do things. But I'm saying if you're not going to be taking any action, you're not going to be seeing any results either. So the mindset piece is big, and it's your child's mindset and it's your mindset as well, because our perception and how we think about our kids and food can really affect how successful they're going to be with learning to like new foods, right? If we're constantly going in with a very critical mindset of like, this isn't working. They're never going to eat this. They give me such a hard time about food. I hate mealtime. Like, if you also are hating mealtime, they're going to kind of feel that energy coming off of you at this time of day, right? We need to shift your mindset a little bit to help shift theirs, right? It's a team effort here. So, you can't just stay doing what you've been doing and expect change either. That's kind of what I'm saying. So, I mean, I wrote a whole book about mealtime mindset, but this is a component that we really look at and we give a lot of support with. So, it's different again at every level, right? So, mindset principles that you would have um at our, higher level is just going to be, it's not going to look anything like the mindset principles we're talking about for a kid that has three foods. Like, it's going to vary based on where your child's at. So that's what I did. I had created this tailored program to get you the information you need that's going to move you to the next level, to help you to see progress, right? So mindset is super important, and it encompasses so many different areas of feeding, but without our mindset, without a good mindset and goals, it's going to be really hard for you to see success and to see it quickly. I'm not saying that, like, if you don't do anything with mealtime mindset, you'll never see any progress. I don't know. Like, I don't know if that's really true for you, but I do think it'll probably take you a little bit longer, and you might not be quite as successful or reach the goals that you have, if you're not thinking about how to reframe their mind about food and yours. Um, because just as much as they're struggling, you are also struggling. Otherwise, you probably wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be listening to this. You wouldn't be searching for answers or searching for help if it wasn't affecting you as well, because you must be stressed. You must be tired of this. You must be annoyed, right? Like, mealtime is stressful in some way to you. And there's some sort of negative experience that you are also having with food because of their problem, maybe, right? But we need to work on both mindsets to see that really faster growth and success. So, again, the four pillars are gut health, right? Sensory integration, oral motor skills, and our mealtime mindset. So, if you're not addressing even just one component of these, you might only be doing one small piece of those four. Maybe you're doing all of them, but whatever it is, just know that there's more than just one small piece of this puzzle that needs to be addressed for you to have that overall successful mealtime, right? Where they're eating a variety. They're not afraid to try new foods. They don't necessarily need distractions. They can eat wherever. They can go to a birthday party. They can go on vacation with you, right? You shouldn't be stressed. They shouldn't be stressed. Like, to have that experience, these four areas need to be working and aligned. And they need to be good. They need to be green, not red, right? If that makes any sense. So, um, when they're all working together, we can have that successful mealtime. We can get them to that foodie level because all of those areas are working together harmoniously. Um, and and yeah, I'm just so super excited about it. I'm really pumped because I know that there's so much, feeding is so complex and there's so many layers to it. But I know that when parents just get the information that they need for their stage and they implement it, I know how powerful that could be. So, just hopefully even hearing and knowing about these four pillars, even if you don't take the next steps with us, I hope you take from this that there's just more to feeding than just putting a bite in your mouth and swallowing it and moving on with your day. There's just a lot going on, and it's super important to address all of these areas to see success long term. So, again, pickyeaterstest.com, and hopefully we will see you on the inside. I will also see you next week, where we are going to be discussing how to get your kids from being afraid of food to someone who loves food like a foodie. All right, I will see you then.
Thank you for listening to How to Unpicky Your Picky Eater. To learn more about achieving your child's feeding goals, check out Christine's website at foodologyfeeding.com. And be sure to tune in next time to How to Unpicky Your Picky Eater.